If you're worried you're running out of ideas for new stories to tell, worry no more. Some of the best ideas for a novel are hidden in your childhood memories. And in this video, dear happy writer, I will show you how to get writing inspiration from childhood memories. We'll see how childhood memories can inspire memorable settings and unforgettable characters, how childhood fears and challenges can provide the entire plot of a novel, and how those fun scenarios you invented as a child are still full of potential and waiting to be turned in full-length novels. Let's see how to turn childhood memories into powerful, creative stories that you will be excited to write. Creative writing ideas from your favorite childhood moments and settings. Childhood is filled with new experiences, new settings, and strong emotions. When we're children, everything we experience is new. Everything seems magical. It's that sense of wonder you get when you see a new type of animal, or you see the sea or the mountains for the very first time. Though I have to say, I still get that same sense of awe when I see the mountains even today. And now I have a clear view of the mountains right from my window. But that sense of wonder is just as strong as when I was a child. I found mountains magical when I was a child, and I still do today. That's a powerful childhood feeling that stayed with me for the rest of my life. Do you have something similar from your childhood? Something that gives you that same sense of awe as when you were a child? You can use that feeling to create magical settings and meaningful experiences for your characters. Which childhood experiences were so happy, exciting, or surprising that you still remember up to this day how you felt in those moments? Tap into those strong childhood memories. Remember how you felt, where you were, who you were with, and what happened during those moments. Then use that as inspiration for your story, or part of your story, or even just a scene. I really hope that your childhood was filled with positive and magical moments. But even difficult childhood moments can spark ideas for your novels. Story inspiration from childhood fears and challenges. As children, everything seems more intense. Not just that sense of awe at all the amazing new experiences we're going through, but also our fears and the toughest moments we go through. These difficult moments can also serve as inspiration for your novels. I truly hope that you never went through anything traumatic during your childhood. And if you did, I hope you were able to come out stronger. But if those moments are too painful and you don't want to think about them, you can absolutely skip to the next chapter. I added the time codes in the video description. However, sometimes it's those very difficult moments that we go through that can spark the strongest ideas for our characters and plots. Remembering how you overcame a challenge during your childhood can help you create a compelling character arc, one that might even inspire someone else going through similar challenges. Your experiences can actually help someone else push through similar childhood challenges. I was very sick as a child, and I spent a big part of my childhood in hospitals and sick at home. So that was a difficult time for me, but even more so for my parents. At the time, I didn't fully understand what they were going through. But now looking back, I can understand their struggles, and I can see how much they were worried about me. And I can also see how strong they were and how much they cared about me. This can serve as inspiration for creating caring, loving, and suffering parents as characters. It can also inspire a story about a child who overcame a weak immune system, how it shaped her life, and ultimately made her stronger. But it's not just our challenges that make for strong memories. It's also our childhood fears. Whatever fears you had as a child, I'm pretty sure you still remember to this day how they felt. I grew up in communist Romania, so we didn't have much of anything. We received bread, butter, milk, and eggs in rations based on family size. And they were not generous with the amounts. But we managed. But another thing we didn't have much of was petrol. And that's where my biggest fears as a child came from. Sometimes we would go on weekend picnics somewhere in the countryside, and I was absolutely terrified that we would run out of gas in the middle of nowhere and not be able to return home. So every time I got into the car, I would check the gas levels to make sure that we have enough to return home. That fear was so strong that I can still remember very clearly how I felt. So now that I think of it from the storytelling perspective, I could create an entire story with lots of adventures. A family runs out of gas in the middle of nowhere, and now they have no way of returning home. How do they deal with the situation? What challenges do they face on their journey home? Who do they meet along the way? How do they eventually find their way home? Do they even manage to return home? Depending on how I approach the story, I can see it as a comedy, a fantasy story, and even a horror story. Starting from your biggest fears as a child, you can come up with a variety of stories in different genres. So use all those difficult childhood experiences to your advantage as a storyteller. Writing inspiration from childhood imagination and what-if games. When we were children, we had a highly active imagination. For many people, that fades as they grow. But luckily for us writers, our imaginations remain strong and we invent lots of stories in our heads even as we age. And when you're feeling like you're running out of ideas, you can tap into your childhood imagination. As children, even the smallest thing we saw could inspire lots of stories. We would take one tiny idea and turn it into a full story with exciting worlds and countless adventures. Do you remember any of them? I'm sure there's at least one imagined scenario from your childhood that you still remember. That can definitely be the starting point of your next novel. I remember that every time I watched a movie or read a book, I would imagine a different ending to the story, or what would have happened if things had gone differently. And sometimes I would even create lots of new adventures for my favorite characters. My favorite one was the character played by Michelle Yeoh in Royal Warriors, and I created so many additional stories for that character. And then I discovered alien movies, and suddenly the possibilities were endless. The cool thing about the stories we imagined as children was that we didn't limit ourselves. We could come up with the most ridiculous creative scenarios and they were all fun. We weren't limited by realism and story structure and genre. When we were children, we would mix elves, aliens, witches, and anything else into one story. And it was so much fun. But now, as writers, we often feel constrained by genre expectations and what we think our readers might want to see in our story. And I feel like that limits the fun we could have with our stories. But who's to say you can't still write that genre mashup you imagined as a child? If you want to write that story about the alien dog who comes to Earth and becomes an Irish dancer in a world of leprechauns and fairies, why not? Bring back that childhood sense of wonder and have fun with your story. Even if you never publish it, at least let it spark your imagination again. What kind of stories did you like to imagine as a child? Before we move on to the next point, if you're enjoying this video, then please like the video and subscribe to my channel for more tips on being a productive, happy writer. Writing inspiration from childhood memories for your characters. The people we met in our childhood can also spark inspiration for our novels. Of course, the people we meet now can also spark inspiration, but sometimes the memories associated with the people we met as children feel stronger and they used to spark more story ideas. As children, we would imagine all kinds of scenarios for the new people we met. We were more curious and playful, and we were constantly creating stories in our minds. Now we're a bit too focused on our lives and our problems to do that, though some of us still do. Try to remember your childhood friends, your teachers, and interesting people you met. Did you ever imagine stories about them when you were young? If not, how about starting now? Think about those people and maybe place them in some funny and unexpected scenarios. Or give them special abilities or unique traits or completely different roles. How would that change them? How would it shape their stories or their future? Remember that movie with Jennifer Garner, 13 going on 30? It's about a young girl who suddenly finds herself as her older self. You can imagine something similar happening to the people you met as a child. Where were they back then? What were they like? And how would they be different if they suddenly found themselves 20 years older? The hero of your next novel might already be waiting for you in a memory you've had all along. If you enjoyed this video, you might also enjoy this other video on getting writing inspiration from life's obstacles. Keep writing and have fun writing!